The new normal. Anne and the Planters are back in LA, and the first thing Anne wants to do is go home to her family. She tries to keep the frogs a secret from them, though Hop Pop mishears her signal and she's forced to drop a lot of information on them at once. Given that, her parents decide to keep the family on lockdown, as Anne doesn't want the government to know about frog people. But after a few days of quarantine, the Planters are itching to get out of the house, and Anne asks her parents to allow them to visit the market in disguise. While shopping there, her parents start to notice how differently Anne is behaving, far more responsible than before, and they admit that she's more mature than she was before she left. But while they're out shopping, a Frobot sent by Andreas to destroy Anne and prevent her from warning of his invasion attacks them while cloaked. The Planters are able to fight back, though they and the robot are held back by their unwillingness to get caught by the people nearby. So to avoid being seen, Anne lures the Frobot into the freezer where the Planters are frozen, and when they're about to be blasted, she's able to use her glowing blue powers to defeat it, with the attacker fleeing into the horizon. Due to Anne being knocked out by her use of the powers, she decides to avoid using them later if she can, as they all head back home. The opening to Season 3 is a parallel to the opening episodes of Season 1 in the sense that it's about characters being transported to a world they're unfamiliar with and steadily getting used to the new challenges. Also in common are plots about trying to lay low due to the negative reaction the natives may have to seeing the new guys. Humans would predictably freak out at the sight of frog people. This time the authority figures are the Boonchois, while Anne is halfway between authority and the one who needs to be monitored, the same role Sprig served before as both the ambassador and ally to Anne while she navigated a new world. But as the first season introduced the world of Amphibia first before introducing the outsider, this season can't do the same as the new setting is not something unknown to audiences. This setting being LA, the most city, Earth city imaginable for a Western audience. The characters are also all characters we know from before, or are at least far more capable of being introduced to us, as we've had Anne explain them to us already. The Boonchoi adults are introduced on top of that by having them serve a similar role to Hop Pop from back in Season 1. So the only things that are introduced are the new things that need to be introduced, and one of these new things is the personality of Anne. Placing her into a similar situation as we've seen before allows the audience to draw a comparison between her old and current behaviors. The immaturity she showed and the selfishness, compounding with the unfamiliarity of Amphibia, are not the same as she is now, trying to be a better person than she was before. So the opener of Season 3 intentionally draws comparison to the opener of Season 1, but instead of introducing a new setting, it introduces a new character, Anne, not to be confused with Anne. Hop till you drop. The Planters are getting into various forms of trouble as Polly keeps picking fights with kids, Sprig keeps trying to touch everything, and Hop Pop keeps nearly falling for scams. So to better ease them into the human realm, Anne takes the Planters to the local mall where she gives them a trial by fire. Polly has to assemble a teddy bear without fighting anyone, Sprig must walk through a mall exhibit without touching anything, and Hop Pop has to walk by the booths without buying anything. She monitors them from the second story until an old friend catches up to her and tries to explain the last 5 months of gossip. While Anne is distracted, Sprig starts to touch everything, accidentally disassembling a piece that begins to roll through the halls. Polly gets mad at the babies grabbing her doll and fights them, only for the moms in the store to go after her. And Hop Pop dives into the wishing fountain to take the money, only to get chased out by mall security. Anne gets away from her old friend to rescue the Planters from themselves, redirecting the mall cop to the moms while grabbing Sprig from the art. She apologizes for giving them too much to do at once, but they point out that she had a similar experience in Amphibia too. Turning point. Sasha and Grime escape from Andreas' attacks shortly after Anne and the Planters left Amphibia, and they fly away on Joe Sparrow to find somewhere safe to hide out. Grime chooses Wartwood, making up a lie about the two being sent there by Anne while she's away on a mission, and the citizens believe this fib as they welcome the two who stay in the Planter family farm. Sasha feels guilty about lying once again, especially when a Frobot attacks the two, sending out a beacon for reinforcements after it's destroyed. Grime prepares to leave Wartwood, but Sasha comes clean to them as she doesn't want the town abandoned to an invasion. She defends them against a giant robot, eventually joined by Grime, who doesn't want to see his friend left behind, and they are soon joined by the rest of Wartwood. Once the robots are all destroyed, the people of Wartwood forgive Sasha, saying that Anne wasn't too different from her. As I've said before, the difference between a good person and a bad person is a comparison between pragmatic logic versus emotional righteousness. A bad person does whatever benefits them, even if the thing that most benefits them is good behavior, while a good person doesn't bother to think about the long-term repercussions of what they're doing. If it will help, they do it. If it messes things up in the future, they'll just save the day again. Normally, Sasha's been a very pragmatic person. She cares about her friends, but only up to the point where doing a favor for them benefits herself too. But here she lies to a bunch of strangers and then defends them from an invasion she directed their way, despite assuming they all hate her. And this is more or less the same story we saw back in Toad Tax, when Anne felt like Wartwood hated her, only to stand up for them anyway. So part of the reason this episode works as a redemption story for Sasha is because she is following in the footsteps of the protagonistic characters, rather than simply apologizing or trying to find some other way to prove she has changed. As I've said before, there's a stark difference between doing what's right and doing what's correct, and Sasha's finally trying to do what's right. Tie Feud. Sprig has made himself at home in the Boonchoi household, though the other planters think he's being rude by acting like he isn't a guest. So to become a Boonchoi in the same way Anne became a planter, Sprig decides to follow Anne to work at her parents' restaurant to prove he's one of them. But he mostly just gets in the way. When Ned, the restaurant's best customer, tries once again to convince the others to give him their recipes for his food truck, Sprig takes matters into his own hands, only to cause a scene outside the restaurant that Anne gets in trouble for. Undeterred, Sprig attempts to destroy the food truck by luring Ned away, only for Anne to get caught barreling down the road with him when she attempts to stop him. They both manage to stop the truck by using up its momentum at a skate park, only for Ned and Miss Boonchoi to catch up to scold the others. But after an apology from Sprig, Miss Boonchoi decides to accept him into the family by yelling at him, while Ned is given a job running deliveries. Adventures in Catsitting. It's been a week since the planters have started staying with the Boonchois, and fearing that he's becoming a burden or a freeloader, Hop Pop tries to come up with some way to pull his own weight. The planters eventually get the opportunity to help out when Domino 1 needs to be taken to the vet while Anne is away at the dentist's. They attempt to take the bus, but are kicked off when Hop Pop tries to use his tongue to steady them, scrambling around the city before finally making it there. But while they're drilling the vet about care for frogs, Domino ends up escaping, and out of options, Sprig calls Mr. Boonchoi to help them. He tells him Domino loves shawarma, and they head to the nearest restaurant, where Hop Pop imitates a fire alarm to get people out, while Polly mimics a ball of yarn to lure Domino back into the crate. Mr. Boonchoi shows up and gets him away from the scene, as Hop Pop apologizes for being too much of a burden, to which he reminds the planters they took his daughter in for 5 months, so they'll never owe anything to them. Sprig wishes he was a part of the family just in the same way that Ned wishes he was a part of the family. Both of these characters aren't actually being treated as one for the same reason. They want to be treated like family, but don't actually want to do the emotional legwork to treat the others the same way. Family in this show's a nebulous term. Actual blood relationships matter far less than the time people spend together. So whether or not two people are family has less to do with the excessive praise and kindness they give, but more the painful emotional lessons. It's the difference between pampering a guest and scolding a child. There is also a difference between being a guest at somebody's house and being a member of their family, and this is a difference that Hop Pop is afraid of being on the wrong side of, due to his appreciation of what the Boonchois have done for them. Except being a member of somebody's family comes with the same benefits and costs as it did back in Amphibia. To be someone's family means that your relationship is no longer transactional. Family does favor for each other's without expecting something in return because they just want their loved ones to be happy. But to really be family, this relationship does still have to go both ways. Not in the sense that you're paying people back, but in the sense that you help because you want to, and are helped for the same reason. Hop Pop wanting to pay back the Boonchois is enough to make him one of the family. It doesn't actually matter if he helps out or not, so long as he wanted to. Because after all, that's the same way he treated Anne in the first season. Fight at the museum. Anne has pulled multiple all-nighters studying ways to get the frogs back to Amphibia, though her mother would rather she study for the months of school she's missed by going to the museum to write a report. Anne tries to research through the museum trip until they discover a vase with a depiction of the Calamity Box and a bipedal frog. A museum employee named Dr. Jan offers to tell them more about this vase, but Anne turns her down, saying they can't trust just anybody with this information. So that night, they sneak into the museum to steal the artifact for themselves to do further investigations. But while taking out the security cameras, they catch the attention of the Frobot from before, who rushes over to stop them. Anne and the planters are able to use some of the museum exhibits to injure the Frobot, eventually dropping a model dinosaur on top of it. This gets the attention of Jan and the security guards, and seeing the bipedal frogs, Jan lies about a performance so she can talk to the planters directly. Anne's hesitant to make an agreement with her, but Hop Hop insists that they trust somebody with the information because they won't get back home alone. Temple Frogs. Anne has received word from Dr. Jan that she's discovered something about the vase, but before she can go see her, Miss Boonchoy informs her that the family's making a trip to the Thai temple for market day, and she needs to go with them for at least an hour. The planters travel along, heading to the various events around the temple, where Polly shows off the Thai she's learned from the Boonchoys, Hop Pop gets into performing con dancing, and Sprig gets into kick volleyball. Realizing the planters are having a good time at the temple, Anne decides to go to the museum on her own, but she gets caught by her mother on the way out, who scolds her for abandoning the Thai community after they supported the Boonchoys during their moment of need. Anne realizes she owes something to the Thai community, and then a swarm of drones sent by the Frobot attacks her and the others. She tries to keep them inside for safety, but the people refuse to hide, fighting alongside the planters. They come out victorious, but the disguises are broken in the scuffle, though the Thai folk don't mind, as a friend of the Boonchoys is a friend of theirs. Dr. Jan makes it to the temple, not able to wait to show off the amphibian language she found on the vase about seeking out an Olm. As it took a while for the frogs of Wartwood to warm up to Anne's presence, there's an assumption that it will take some time for the humans of Earth to warm up to the planters, so she tries to do what she can to slowly ease them into the world and vice versa, assuming she introduces them to anyone at all. Season 3 has been a reverse of Season 1 up to this point, so the way to introduce new concepts is through their differences to the stories we've already seen. Wartwood was slow to accept them at first, but the first person outside the family to meet the planters was excited about meeting frog people and eager to help out. It was only Anne's previous experience that made her think otherwise, and this thinking convinced her it was more reasonable to break into a museum instead of talking to an expert who was eager to infodump about a way back home. After learning that not everybody is going to be as skeptical of her new family as the frogs once were of her, she takes them to meet even more of the people she grew up with, the Thai community. It's revealed by Miss Boonchoy that the Thai community rallied to the Boonchoys when their daughter went missing and helped with cooking and the like. And given this kindness, it's not a surprise they would keep helping when she got back. This parallels the way that Wartwood was willing to rally around Anne because they wanted to help the planters who they knew. After all, the friend of a friend must also be a friend. Fixing Frobo. The planters are busy watching cat videos on the internet while Polly's at work fixing up Frobo. Her attempts are hardly successful, getting Frobo online enough to indiscriminately blast lasers before Anne shuts him off and Hop Pop forbids Polly from continuing to work with the robot. Polly ignores this request to find more information about robots online, discovering the IT Gals, two mechanical influencers, and she gets advice from them on how to rebuild her robot, though once again she ignores the advice not to power him up indoors and makes the final changes. But Frobo, when repaired, only returns to his factory settings and begins flying up to a higher vantage point with Polly on his head before he runs out of fuel. While the two are in freefall, Polly reminds Frobo of who she is, and he comes to just enough to place Polly inside his chassis to protect her from the impact. Polly survives, as does Frobo's head, just in time for the It Girls, concerned that one of their callers was about to power up a robot in her garage, to arrive and assist her in rebuilding. Anne-sterminator. Anne decides it's finally time to come clean to her family about everything that happened in Amphibia, including the fact that King Andreas is planning to kill her and invade. but she's interrupted by the Frobot returning after Andreas gave it 24 hours to finish the job. It shows up at the Boonchoi house to attack, only to get confused by the shrine to Anne her mother built in the house. The family flees in the van, getting chased down the highway by the Frobot as Anne tries to fight it off with her tennis racket. They eventually wind up at the junkyard where Anne's parents scold her for not really growing up because she is still keeping so much from them. But when the Frobot attacks again, they work together to fight it off by having Anne's mom make more fakes before she stabs it in an ambush with the rest of the family. The Frobot prepares to explode to take them all out at once, but Anne uses her blue powers to throw it into the sky. In the end, she decides to be more upfront about everything involving Andreas as the episode ends on the FBI investigating footage of the chase scene. It's a bit strange to find out that there's an extra-dimensional king with an army of robots at his command intent on invading Earth from a land where two of your friends are still trapped, and not to try to tell anybody about it. It's a bit weirder to get upset with a middle schooler for knowing all this information and not handling the knowledge well, but maybe that's the point. If Anne really was mature enough, she would have handled the information in a more pragmatic way. Then again, this information is far from a realistic situation. It's not like adults regularly deal with what are basically frog aliens. In fact, if Anne had led with the frog people invasion headed to Earth, then people, even her family, would probably just have assumed some sort of brain injury. Anne refusing to warn her family about the incoming Frobot invasion was really just a delay of the inevitable, but it also parallels Hop Pop burying the Calamity Box and his other attempts at protecting his grandkids from reality, only to make them less prepared for it. So even though she was wrong, it's hard to act as though she's a bad person for not warning those closest to her. Mr. X. A federal agent named Mr. X is tracking the Boonchois after connecting them to the frogs he's found, and with the aid of his assistant Jenny, tracks them to the family restaurant, and later to Anne's location. The Boonchois try to call Anne while following the agent to the movie theater, but Anne doesn't hear the call until Mr. X has already reached them. The planters try to hide as the Boonchois reach the outside of the theater, and Anne insists that they don't come inside as she claims she can handle it on her own. But Mr. X calls for backup, who surround the entire theater, as Anne is still planning on taking on the agent 4-against-1. So her parents make a plan of their own to cut the power and swap out the planters with Earth frogs just before the agents break into the stall Anne was hiding in. The rest of the FBI laughs at RuPaul's frog theory, as the Boonchois escape thanks to the power of a tracking device they had on Hop Pop. Sprig's birthday. Anne finds out it's Sprig's birthday, and that on Amphibia they celebrate birthdays with a crown and a short moment of self-reflection. But because they're on Earth, Anne insists on throwing Sprig an Earth birthday party, getting on her bike and taking him around the city for a variety of activities. On their way back from the observatory, Anne asks Sprig if it was his best birthday yet, but he only places it at number 3. So Anne tries to make the day even better by taking him up in a hot air balloon, but this is cancelled when high winds start up, and they agree to simply sit in the basket. The high winds then blow the balloon away, and they end up sailing through LA, terrifying various people with the creepy clown balloon before it nears a construction site. Anne and Sprig have to jump from the balloon before it pops, landing in a dumpster where Anne apologizes for not making it a great birthday. But Sprig points out that it was still great, as the only two that were better were the day he was born and the year he got his iconic hat from his parents. Anne is once again trying to prevent her family from getting involved in her attempts to keep the planters safe and get them all home. As usual, she's gotten in over her head trying to solve problems by herself, not only retreading her character arcs of rushing into things she can't handle, but also mimicking a few of Hop Pop's character flaws, as he tries too much to protect those closest to him, without realizing that they have things they can offer as well. Anne has spent so much time away from her family that she's forgotten how much they've done for her before, partially why she's matured so much being the fact that she's had to fill in these gaps on her own. But spending time away from her parents has also given her the chance to learn from others too. But returning home hasn't also inverted these character dynamics, but swapped who gets involved in what plots as well. Season 3 is starting to show more and more episodic scripts as characters will do things like celebrate a birthday party, whereas back in Season 1, Anne had the excuse of being unable to leave the valley due to weather and the toad towers. In Season 3, there's not much of an excuse to ignore the ticking clock of Andreas building up a robot army in the background, but maybe that's the point. Maybe it's not about taking a pragmatic approach to stopping a villain from going after your loved ones, and maybe the time she spends with the planters during these few weeks is what the fight was all about. Spider-Sprig. Inspired by a superhero movie, Sprig decides to don a self-made costume to become Frogman, so he can patrol for crime around the neighborhood and be accepted by the people of Earth. He soon encounters Robert Otto, a community patrol officer who believes he's also a hero patrolling the neighborhood. Sprig starts to get people's attention when he saves a bus full of kids, including Otto's granddaughter, Molly Jo, as more and more people start to praise the young frog instead. But while in the junkyard from Anne-sterminator, Otto finds the Frobot's arm and equips it, and he decides to take out Frogman himself. Their battle has a ton of collateral damage, including nearly injuring Molly Jo, who recognizes and tells off her grandfather as well as Sprig for their selfishness and carelessness. The two heroes realize she's right and begin repairing the damage to the city together, with Sprig leaping into the sunset before retiring the Frogman persona. Olivia and Yunan. Olivia has a flashback to when she explained her promise to her mother, to Marcy, that she would protect the land and all its inhabitants. In the present, Olivia and Yunan are called to speak with Andreas, briefly watching him talk to himself before they're told to expand drilling operations. Unhappy with the state of their land and their leader, the duo decides to recruit help by rescuing Marcy, who's being held underneath the castle. They head to the secret rooms from last season's Slumber Party to End All Slumber Parties, where they find Marcy in a tank in a room full of eyes. But when they try to remove her from the tank, the three find themselves outside, confronted by their worst fears. Marcy figures out it's just a simulation, and Yunan discovers the eyes are projectors as they work together to smash them all and appear back at the castle. But Andreas stops them from leaving, introducing them to the Core. The Core is a collection of the greatest minds in Amphibia stored digitally, and seeking a new host, choosing Marcy due to her intellect. Marcy is strapped to a chair and possessed by the Core. The difference between Anne's time in Amphibia and Sprig's time on Earth comes down to whether these characters were given the chance to acclimate to the new environment. Anne eventually started to get involved with Wartwood as the people there slowly warmed up to her, but due to the fact that the frogs have been threatened with giant robots and government scientists and so on, it's far more dangerous for the planters to start trying to acclimate to American society. The threats to their lives are not wild animals trying to eat them for survival, but entire government systems who can't tolerate their existence as they want to learn more, or because they want to stop others from learning their plans. And now these others include the Core, a collection of minds that seems to be communicating with Andreas in some way. He went from an affable king to a cold, calculating villain to subservient and deferring to some higher power, as if these minds have really been pulling the strings all along. The fact that the Core wanted Marcy's mind for the same reason that Yunan and Olivia wanted her on their side indicates this isn't a decided conflict, though. Despite the actions Andreas has taken with the Calamity Box being a scheme centuries in the making, I think centuries, the arrival of the humans in Amphibia still seems to be a deciding factor in whether these schemes actually come to fruition. From the help the planters have been getting on Earth, though, it also seems as if the arrival of frogs on Earth could be equally impactful, if only Anne would accept the help. Hollywood Hop Pop. Anne is taking the planters to Hollywood to look around when Hop Pop gets out of the tour bus to go see more. He finds a line for an audition seeking older men, and he meets Humphrey Westwood, who kindly offers Hoppadiah his spot in line. Hop Pop gets the part by naming a new catchphrase, and by the next day he's all over merchandise and TV screens. This includes a screen belonging to Mr. X, who sets out to track down Hoppadiah after realizing he's one of the frogs. This leads to a chase scene through a film studio, including several cameos from Suspicion Island characters and the like, before winding up at the tower where Hop Pop's next big role is. But when he runs into Humphrey working there as a janitor, he offers to swap with the guy to repay the kindness and get away from Mr. X. Mr. X bursts into the building to capture Hoppadiah only to have grabbed the wrong guy again, as Hop Pop and the planters leave the studio with the old man deciding he wants to direct instead. If you give a frog a cookie. The planters are feeling homesick, making mud puddles and building miniature models of Wartwood to feel better. Anne gets a call from Dr. Jan about an interdimensional scientist named Dr. Frakes, though she wants to finish the vetting process before telling them about the frogs. But hoping to cheer up the planters, she looks up this Dr. Frakes herself and finds a scientist running a children's museum. She lies to get past her assistant Terry for an interview, where they meet an eccentric scientist who has a functioning portal, explained as her having created one by analyzing the energy signature from the Calamity Box first being used. To keep the planters happy, Anne asks her to activate this portal, which only opens up for a second and not even on their dimension, and the blast from the activation reveals the trio as frogs. Frakes kidnaps the planter family and takes them to her lab for dissection. Terry teams up with Anne to save them, giving up her career to stop her boss from cutting open these frogs. They save the planters by tossing Anne's cookies to a crowd of hungry kids and then ride into the sunset, while Terry volunteers to work on a portal herself. Thus far, almost everybody who has had the opportunity to meet the planters has found them charming and served to be an ally, the obvious exception being Mr. X, who is trying to hunt them down, although it's questionable whether he can be considered to have met the planters, as all he really knows is of them. So this episode introduces the first character to serve as an antagonist who wasn't from Amphibia, introduced purely because Anne was tired of bad news and dead ends. The frogs have been getting along well on Earth, but only in the short bursts Anne has ever really allowed them the freedom to get along with others. Tired of hurting their feelings by shooting down all their progress, Anne attempts to force progress, getting the family in over their heads as she pursues new avenues of getting home without double-checking that they're legit first. This is the same flaw she had back in the first few seasons, and so connecting this character flaw from before with an attempt to go back to the locations from before implies that Anne's character growth thus far is actually making things harder on the others. The planter family does not simply miss their home in Wartwood, but they miss their family from Wartwood too, and that includes the old Anne. Froggy Little Christmas. Miss Boonchoy is given an offer to make a parade float in the holiday parade, but she turns it down as she wants to help the planters to keep a low profile. But as it's always been Miss Boonchoy's dream to participate, Anne decides to make the family's float in secret by recruiting the help of various allies they've made in the last few weeks. While she's going around the city recruiting this help, the planters ask these people what the meaning of the holidays really is, only to get differing answers from each one, answers that convince Sprig he needs to give Anne the perfect gift, or he'll ruin Christmas. They begin working on the float while Mr. Boonchoy looks for the perfect, candid shot of the family for their card, eventually revealing their preparations to Miss Boonchoy, who's happy as she feels like participating in the parade means she's finally made it in America, rather than just being viewed as an immigrant. Back in Amphibia, King Andreas has received a new type of weaponized drone from his researchers that he's eager to test out so he can destroy Anne in the human realm. After a few days of searching and construction, Andreas' drone finally finds the Boonchoys in the middle of the parade, and he has the robot possess a giant Santa to begin the attack. They run from this giant Santa, which most people just think is part of the show, until they're backed into a corner. With nothing left to throw, the planters shoot a firework containing the flaming tree at Santa, blowing him up and preventing any further destruction. The planters, even more confused about the meaning of the holiday, finally get an answer from Anne that Christmas isn't really about anything but what you think it's about. Sprig gives a self-made action figure to Anne, and she writes to the families of Sasha and Marcy, telling them their daughters are still alive. Throughout this episode, the planters keep asking people what the meaning of Christmas is, getting different answers from everyone they ask. This is a holiday special cliché that audiences are used to the point where it's not really questioned when Rebecca Sugar sings the answer towards the end as the most correct interpretation is given. But this episode also goes out of its way to subvert that expectation by having the meaning of the holiday explained as whatever you think it is. For example, when Dr. Jan is asked about the meaning of Christmas, she goes into a long rant about the history of the holiday and its roots in various midwinter holidays in the past, from Saturnalia to the modern day. Her explanation of what the holiday actually is does little to properly answer any of the questions asked by the planter family because the frogs have already seen these celebrations and preparations, none of which can be immediately or simply connected to the parade floats or pyrotechnics being prepared. They ask the IT girls about the holiday and get answers about exchanging gifts and preparing a massive tree with a lot of light, which is also not an incorrect answer as without the sights and sounds of the holiday season, it doesn't really feel like a big celebration. The shopping season is part of that rush, or rather a part of the stress. And it's not Christmas unless you panicked over gift giving. Even though you know it doesn't matter that much, it still feels like if you're half-assing it, then you didn't really do much. Miss Boonchoy explains that her obsession with the parade is that it's a large community event, and that by participating in it, she'll officially be recognized as a member of the community at large, that she's finally integrated into American culture and isn't just a visitor, a bit like how Sprig wanted to be treated like a Boonchoy before. On the opposite end is Mr. Boonchoy, who spends the episode looking for the perfect Christmas card photo to send home to the rest of the family, so he can show off how well they're getting along in their new home. Anne ends up saying that the holidays are about spending time with those you love, like a found family, and yet without any of those other preparations, it's just a random gathering and not something more special than that. But that's the point. There's no right way to celebrate the holiday season, nor is there a wrong way. As long as you feel like you've celebrated Christmas or Hanukkah or whatever without regret, then you understand the meaning behind the season. Escape to Amphibia. Terry has finally finished construction of the portal by realizing that the music played by the box determines the coordinates of where the portal opens up, but they still need much more power before they can make a portal large enough to enter through. During a shopping trip to get supplies for the journey, Anne begins to worry about leaving her family yet again to go back. But before they leave the store, the FBI surrounds the location and the frogs are taken into custody. The Boonchoys pursue the agent's van only to track it to a compound they can't storm alone. So they recruit the help of all their allies thus far with the plan to sneak in and rescue the planters, though they're caught by Mr. X and imprisoned, save for Jan and Terry, who left to steal the compound's generator. While imprisoned, Anne breaks down over the fact that she's just a kid who has the responsibility of stopping an invasion of Earth while being incapable of even telling her parents goodbye. They manage to break out when the scientists finish stealing the generator, and Anne fights her way through a bunch of FBI agents, rescuing the frogs before the rest of the group breaks in with a stolen van that they used to escape, though during the chase scene, Mr. X is still able to place a tracking device on the van. They return to the lab where Terry and the others start testing out their new power source while Anne says a proper goodbye to her parents, who admit they've been preparing for her to leave for days as well. The portal opens, though it's still too small to go through, and then the place is surrounded by FBI agents. Seeing everyone in trouble, Anne powers up again, and the power flowing from her opens the portal even larger. Seeing a giant mantis on the other side, Anne lures it across and begins attacking the gathered agents, giving Anne and the planters cover to leave. They finally escape back to Amphibia, only to see that the landscape is barren as Andreas' forces have razed most of the area to build his army. The major conflict facing Anne through this episode is similar to a conflict she felt back in Season 2 during the build-up to her return to Earth. Anne was afraid that she would never get the chance to see the planters again and felt unsure about actually going through with fixing the gems on the music box. And here, she's unsure about returning to Amphibia through a portal because it might mean not getting to spend time with her Earth family again. And all of this is made worse by the fact that once she does get separated from the Boonchoys again, she has a massive responsibility to fight off a king and potentially fight her former friends too, and she doesn't think of herself as up to the task. And Anne is right. Everything she's done so far wasn't her doing, but the actions of a large group of people supporting her. She didn't charge the gems or rediscover how to use the music box herself. She didn't make the portal. She didn't break into the FBI alone. And all of that is completely fine. Anne is trying to do everything herself despite the fact that nothing she has accomplished thus far has been done alone. She has her family to work with, she has friends to rely on, so despite the fact that she's a middle schooler trying to overthrow a king, there's a good chance she succeeds not out of her own power but by recruiting the aid of so many others to do what she can't. Anne doesn't have to be anything other than a leader, the kind to do a little bit, then inspire others with her example so they do the rest. An impossible task broken up into little pieces with each person doing a little bit. It's far more believable to manage than one person overthrowing the existing order all at once. Except all of this is still a ton of pressure to place on a child, so of course she is nervous, even if she does learn her lesson about caring for and about others. Commander Anne. After seeing the destruction of Amphibia, the planters return to Wartwood, where they find it in ruins too, and overrun by giant creatures with mind control collars on. They're saved by Sasha, who's been living in the planter family tunnels, where she leads a resistance movement against Andreas. Sasha is leading this resistance as she has the Helmet of Authority, a Wartwood artifact, though she gives it to Anne as she doesn't trust herself with that power. Anne is then put in charge of leading the rebellion as it destroys the factory creating the collars, though she struggles with this leadership role because she forgets the map and orders random charges and other poorly thought out strategies. When the frogs assaulting the factory are all eaten by a giant snake, Anne forces Sasha to take back the helmet by removing it before leaping inside the snake's mouth. Sasha dons the title and begins giving orders that help them out of the snake's stomach, removing its collar before everyone works together to destroy the plant. She's about to return the helmet to Anne, but Anne insists that she can be trusted with the authority due to the fact that she was trying to give it up. Sprivy. Sprig and Ivy, the most openly lovey couple in the Resistance, are both sent on a mission to take out a guard tower so a delivery of supplies can make it through the valley to Wartwood. Sasha leads the mission, but once they get closer to the objective, the teams are chosen, with Sprig and Ivy being split up. Not wanting to spend any time apart, Sprig writes fake orders from Sasha, ordering the teams to be rearranged so they can be together, and Sprivy proceeds to practice their dancing by the guard tower while waiting for Stumpy and Fern to take out the shield generator. But Stumpy struggles to climb up the hill to get there, and Fern is unable to cut the wires powering the station without him as a distraction. When Sprig sees the two struggling, he and Ivy rush over to help them out, with Ivy distracting the crab guarding the control panel as Fern cuts it, all while Stumpy is able to test the shields down below with his fake hand while Sprig takes out reinforcements. The mission is a success and they return to Sasha, who scolds them for jeopardizing the mission to stay together before Wigbert Ribbiton shows up with weapons and the like. After repeatedly betraying the others and constantly watching out for only herself, Sasha reunites with Anne and is immediately forgiven. Anne's love of her friend, giving her, I think, like a third chance by this point, maybe a fourth. But unlike before, when Sasha saved them from the Third Temple's challenges to prove she'd reformed, here, Sasha's forgiven immediately. And while this might come across as Anne remembering that Sasha was right about Andreas, it plays more into the fact that Anne is just a forgiving person, willing to put mistakes in the past to give people the trust they need to grow as people. But Sasha isn't so forgiving of herself. She's in charge of the Wartwood Resistance, but this is only a title she's given based on her strengths. Sasha repeatedly tries to make Anne the Resistance leader because she doesn't think she deserves the title, even though she's already proven she's capable of it. Sasha's element is strength, and just like Marcy's wit was not only a test of what she knew, but the ability to admit when she didn't know something, sometimes strength is the ability to admit when you don't have the strength for a task. Anne ends up trusting Sasha not in spite of her claiming she's not a good fit, but because she's admitted to not being a good fit for leadership. That she would be willing to give up a position of power is enough to prove that she's not planning on abusing it in the future, and that proof ensures that she gets to keep it. Sasha's Angels. Sasha and Anne lead a group of frogs consisting of Wally, Miss Croaker, Loggle, Maddie, and, for some reason, Toady, in a raid against a group of marauders who have been stealing their supplies. Toady insists on being the lookout yet again, as he's fearful of getting involved in a direct fight, preferring to stay in his comfort zone. They assault the Marauders' hideout only to get caught in an ambush, with only Sasha and Anne escaping, the rest imprisoned by the gang, revealed to be led by Barry, the old candy merchant. Their first escape attempt is ruined when Toady freezes up and is thrown to stop the rest. But after one of the frogs guarding them destroys a few of Toady's belongings, he snaps and starts demanding the others organize under his leadership with a more elaborate plan. Outside the camp, Anne and Sasha are training together, while Sasha tries to convince Anne not to run back in to save them, as she needs to trust her soldiers and take fewer risks. After they hear an explosion, the two girls rush inside, only to see Toady leading the escape attempt, destroying the Marauders' hideout. In the end, Sasha explains that the frogs of Wartwood have spent so much time together that they know their strengths and weaknesses enough to trust one another. Olm Town Road. In spite of the recent successes of the Wartwood Resistance, they've yet to put a dent in King Andreas' plans. But Anne remembers the vase where Dr. Jan found the secret message about meeting with the Mother Olm. So they make a plan to speak with the only Olms anyone has met, the twins from Quarreler's Pass. After meeting the two-headed Olm again, Sasha's able to threaten information out of them about Proteus, the secretive city of the Olms, though as the duo has been banished, they can't enter this city. Sasha brings them along anyway, trying to give them a second chance with their homeland. Once there, they find the city has been wrecked by constant earthquakes, the result of Andreas' drilling, and they try but fail to convince the leader, Parisia, to help them out. They're kicked out again, so Lysel and Angwin take the resistance to the surface, where they try to shut down a giant drill on their own. Anne and Sasha can't figure out how to stop it, so the two-headed Olm sacrifices themselves to shut it down by force. This contraption falls into the city, where Parisia still refuses to hear them out, so Sasha yells at her, calling her an idiot and saying they'll stop Andreas on their own. Impressed by being stood up to, Parisian offers to not only take the other Olms back into Proteus, but to offer them an audience with the Mother of Olms. Sasha's redemption arc actually began while she still had ongoing betrayals in the works, rather than happening all at once. And one of the things that made her see the benefits of fixing her behavior was her interaction with Toti, a guy who constantly needed to be told what to do during Battle of the Bands. She decided to stop being so bossy of other people and to allow them to do their own thing, as she saw that Marcy and Anne had grown up without the need to be pushed around, and the fact that ordering them around so much was actually stifling their growth as individuals. So one way of proving that she's not only learned this lesson but has been implementing it is the way she treats Toti with the respect to allow him to mature on his own in his own time. With no Toadstool to boss him around, he's forced to become a stronger fighter and more of a leader, his struggle in this episode paralleling the struggles that Anne and Marcy have been facing for 2 seasons, and one Sasha finally understands. An additional struggle Sasha has been dealing with, though, comes from the fact that she still earned the forgiveness of Anne and Wartwood, but doesn't feel like she deserves it. But rather than constantly trying to make things up to her friends, she instead begins to embody this forgiveness by fighting for the forgiveness of others, like trying to bring Lysel and Angwin back into the good graces of their home city. Because a person really only deserves the things that they wish for other people. Mother of Olms. Sasha and Anne meet up with the Mother of Olms alongside the planters, though Hop Pop is struggling with the stairs and other obstacles due to his age. Upon reaching the Mother Olm, they mention the music box, and she prepares to teach them a prophecy, only to admit that in her age she doesn't remember it. So to help her remember, the kids climb inside of her head and apply a brain ointment that ought to help, wading through earwax and getting shocked by her nervous system. When they finally make it to her brain, they find the corpse of the doctor who used to apply it, as well as a swarm of mosquito bats who chase them out. Meanwhile, Hop Pop has been complaining about his old age with the Mother of Olms, who tries to cheer him up by pointing out the knowledge that comes with age. But when the bats fly out of Mother Olm's head and Hop Pop hears the kids in trouble, he uses his horticulture knowledge to grab a few nearby plants that will force Mother Olm to sneeze the kids to safety. Once safely outside, Mother Olm prepares to remember the prophecy to no success, as the brain ointment was to expire to work. But Hop Pop points out that he writes things down if he thinks he'll forget, and they learn the prophecy was on the ceiling all along. She reads aloud a tale of 3 stars who will use their powers, those similar to Anne's, to destroy an unsleeping, unnatural thing. Grime's Pupil. In order to recruit more allies for the attack on Andreas, Sasha sends Sprig and Grime to convince Grime's sister Beatrix to join them with her Toad army. But Beatrix only laughs at the idea of frogs and toads working together, challenging Grime to single combat over control of the combined armies. Grime accepts, though Beatrix gets to choose who she'll fight, and she selects Sprig. Grime has to train Sprig in combat, something the two only agree to do because Sasha ordered it. When their training starts, they get along even worse than before, as Sprig thinks he's stronger than Grime due to beating him in Newtopia, while Grime thinks Sprig just got lucky. After they fight, Sprig decides to train on his own, only to get swarmed by giant hyenas, and Grime ends up saving him as the two fight together. Grime is impressed by Sprig's speed, and Sprig is impressed by Grime's strength, and the two create a new fighting style that combines these attributes. The day of the fight arrives, and Sprig gets into an early lead, finishing off the fight with the rage he learned from Grime himself. Beatrix admits defeat and accepts that the frogs and toads can work together. The racial tensions between the toads and the frogs come to a boiling point in this episode, not merely through Beatrix and her toad army, but from Grime feuding with Sprig, each one thinking they're superior to the other, and both also being proven right. Sure, Sprig was able to defeat Grime in single combat before, but that was just once and done with an ambush. In a fair fight, Sprig might not stand a chance against a much larger opponent who knows he's coming, and this much is proven when he attempts Grime's training routine only to fail spectacularly at even the warm-up. But in the same way, Grime struggles to do the things frogs have an advantage in doing due to their smaller size, and when Sprig starts to combine the strengths of both species, he's able to create a fighting style greater than the sum of its parts. Yet what this also accomplishes is a combination of the toad and frog ideologies, not just how they fight people. Because the toads are tough and militaristic, and yet they're also very quick to trust anyone who can prove their value in a fight. Sasha was even able to get the toads to respect her after leading them in battle once, and even Beatrix changed her mind on frogs in general after a single fight with Sprig. This is in stark contrast to the frogs, who are wary and skeptical even of people who would make good allies, as Sprig refuses to learn things that would make him grow stronger due to the fact that he just doesn't like the guy who's supposed to teach him. Just like Wartwood rejected humans at first, but are now thriving under the leadership of two. The Root of Evil. The planters are recruiting for the rebellion by showing off the perks of joining, though Hop Pop struggles with getting new recruits interested in the Resistance's farms. But when Bessie slides off a cliff and they wake up in a strange secret community named Gardenton, Hop Pop is excited to see that everyone there is interested in farming, as well as very talented at it. The planters and Loggle are taken to meet the mayor of Gardenton, but on the way, Loggle steps on a flower and everyone begins sobbing. The mayor is revealed to be Apothecary Gary attached to Jeremy, and all the townsfolk have his spores on their heads to help them be better attuned to the needs of the plants. The planters try to flee to find Bessie, but are captured by the plants all coming to life. Then, they notice one of Andreas's drones attached to the back of their cart, which calls for reinforcements, and soon Gardenton is surrounded by Frobots burning everything. The planters are able to escape in the chaos, though Hop Pop feels bad for the farming community and convinces them to turn back and help them fight. After the Frobots are taken care of, Hop Pop convinces Gary that he's much better off using his mind control powers for horticulture and working with the Resistance, even offering information about the mind control collars Andreas has been using, and that they might be connected to another being like him. The Core and the King. King Andreas is talking to Darcy as they prepare to purge excess memories from their brain after explaining that the core is in charge of the body, though a few memories and habits are still leaking through. As he's waiting for the process to finish, he sees an old painting of himself and two of his close friends, Leaf and Beryl. The episode flashes back to the day Andreas was promoted to king, as his father was about to enter the core with the rest of the ancestors, receiving the key to the music box so he can continue to invade other realms to support the kingdom. But when telling this news to his friends, Leaf touches the box and receives a premonition about the destruction of the land, warning Andreas and Beryl about it, who take their concerns to Andreas's father. He ignores the warning and considers Leaf a traitor, and later on, when she steals the box from stopping it from being used for destruction, Andreas chases her down alongside Beryl, though Beryl lets her go rather than stopping her. She escapes on one of the Mossmen she controlled using the Planter family dance, while Beryl is banished to guard the towers for not capturing her. Back in the present, Darcy's optimization is finished, and Andreas starts preparing to invade Earth as the core says they're almost proud of him. Skills and talents are not inherently good or evil traits as much as the associated tropes we see in media tend to indicate otherwise. Apothecary Gary has the ability to control minds, making him an effective villain for a Halloween-themed horror episode. And here, the show is able to make a more unnerving story involving his hive mind creations in a small, secretive town. But while Gary might be a bit evil, the mushrooms he uses are still just tools. And just as much as the way a person is might influence the way they use their tools, be it good or bad, the way a person uses their tools can also have an influence on the type of person they become. It's not just that a good guy might use hive mind powers to create very large crops and feed a bunch of people, but after feeding so many people, one might change the way they think to be a kinder person all around. In the same sense, Andreas intended to use the music box to invade because he was surrounded by people who wanted to use that tool for evil purposes. He wasn't a bad guy, he just lived in a world where that sort of violence was the default. but Leaf and Beryl recognized the end result of all this violence and attempted to stop it, and they likely would have been successful if they were allowed to stay with Andreas to convince him that the music box is a tool, not a moral. Newts in tights. Anne and Sprig are monitoring a caravan of supplies for Andreas, only to see it stopped by the wounded orphan Gambit, ultimately being accosted by Tritonio and a new gang of tight-wearing Newts. Seeing his tactics, Anne offers him a role in their rebellion, though Tritonio turns it down, saying he has no loyalties to anyone but himself. He references his childhood where he was betrayed by gangs who were also only out for themselves. During their next raid against a caravan, this is proven as Anne and Sprig take out 2 giant snakes serving as guards, only for the rest of the gang to be captured in a trap, and Tritonio flees into the woods rather than rescuing them. Anne tells him off for running away and argues that companionship is more valuable than mere survival before she and Sprig set out to rescue the Newts in tights. They arrive at the site of a Judge Frobot, about to sentence them to death, freeing the others, though the bot transforms and overpowers them. But Tritonio saves the day as he rallies them to win the fight with Anne's help, gathering back at the camp where he agrees to work with them in the rebellion. Back in Wartwood, Hop Pop discovers a door with the family's insignia on it and places the Planter family tome inside to open it, only to find a small bedroom with a blank letter on the desk. Fight or flight. While on a stakeout to discover what's been eating their food supplies, Anne, Sprig, and Soggy Joe find that it was Domino 2, and they follow the Killamoth to its nest where they watch it get captured by Andreas' robots. Thinking the issue is resolved, Sprig and Joe are ready to go back, but Anne insists on not only rescuing her old pet, but taking in her babies so the Resistance can protect them during the mission. She and Sprig set out to find Domino 2, locating her in a collar as she and other moths are being forced to power a turbine. Sprig is unsure if the moth will even recognize Anne, but after she frees Domino 2, the moth begins to cuddle with her. Before escaping, Domino 2 insists on returning for the rest of the pack, and they turn around to free them, only for these moths to fight over who gets to eat Sprig. Domino 2 screeches, and they all stop, revealing that Domino 2 was the pack leader. They fly back to the Planter farm, where the rest of Wartwood has fallen in love with the cute larva, with Hop Pop even naming one of them Lenny Longbottom, after their old spider, and Sasha is excited to have airborne cavalry. The last few episodes of Season 3 are building to a climax, and what better way is there to sell the scale of the climax than explaining it through the context of showing what's at stake. It's not enough to just say that Andreas is going to destroy Amphibia so he can destroy the Earth, it's better to show the people whose lives he's going to upend. And this can't just be done after the threat is established, but before. The first 2 seasons felt at points as though they were just a loose collection of disconnected stories, but each of these tales were really about showing off who the characters in this world are. So Andreas is threatening not Amphibia, but the lifestyle of people like Tritonio, or Apothecary Gary. He's not only destroying the environment, but he's destroying the homes of creatures like Domino 2 and the other giant moths. Audiences tend to care about people and characters more than they care about locations or objects, so a threat against the natural resources of a planet or a vaguely similar world to ours doesn't really feel impactful unless we know a person it's hurting. The 3 Armies. The Newt and Toad armies converge on Wartwood to join the Resistance in the days leading up to Andreas' invasion. But the leaders of each of these armies struggle to work together, nearly calling off the Resistance on the spot when Tritonio, Beatrix, and Hop Pop start insulting one another. But Anne is convinced that she can mediate between the 3 groups during a strategy session, but they all come up with conflicting ideas and begin to fight even more. So she brings the 3 armies together for team-building exercises, only for each group to begin fighting in even larger numbers rather than getting along. When these arguments erupt into violence, Anne gets angry and transforms, using her blue powers to quiet the entire army before telling them off and announcing that she cannot fix their problems. She and Sasha retire to the strategy room where she apologizes for losing her temper, but the leaders of each army follow her, saying they came up with a plan together. Once somewhat reunited, Mother Olm enters, saying that Andreas was not invading in a few days, but tonight. The beginning of the end. The Wartwood Resistance has adopted a strategy from a different movie that Marcy always made the other girls watch at sleepovers, where the main army serves as a distraction for a smaller force to sneak in. This smaller force consists of Sasha, Anne, Grime, and the Planters, who fly in on Domino 2 and Joe Sparrow to enter the castle, rescue Marcy, and retrieve the music box. They're stopped by Yunan and Olivia, controlled by Andreas's collars, though they use their coordination to fight them off and free the two, who then warn that Marcy is different than who she was before. This is confirmed immediately when the music box is revealed as a fake, and Darcy traps them, saying she knew they would try a strategy from her favorite movie. With the Resistance's leaders captured, Darcy presents them to the rebellion, and tells them to abandon their cause and retreat. Darcy prepares to kill Anne so the last gem's power will return to the box, but Anne buys time by asking if she's certain that would work. This convinces Darcy to delay her execution to perform a dissection first, but before all of that, she orders Andreas to open the portal to Earth. The episode ends on swarms of Andreas's robots pouring into the skies of LA. There are hundreds of years of animosity between the Newts, Toads, and Frogs in Amphibia, and an afternoon of team-building exercises isn't going to be enough to make people put that amount of casual hatred behind them. As much as each army is aware that they have a common enemy, the most beneficial action of ignoring the grudges they've been holding on to is still difficult, not only because of what each thinks individually, but because they're unsure if the others are also willing to put the grudge behind them. It's hard to trust a person who you know has reason not to trust you, but everyone there has a reason to trust Anne, as she's consistently shown that she's deserving of this trust, in the fact that she keeps putting other people's interests ahead of her own. Each of the three armies owes her something, and so it makes sense that Anne would think she was the right person for the job of reuniting these races on good terms once again. But she fails to do this, as it's impossible for one person to do that. And this is the exact thing that Anne was worried about before coming back to Amphibia, that she's not strong enough to save the day. She's right, too. She can't. But everybody else can, and so this is how they're going to beat Andreas, not relying on one person, but each other. In this same way, they can't undo the centuries of hatred in the past, but they can at least work together to start adding better memories to the future. It won't erase the trauma, but together the Wartwood Resistance might be able to at least stop defining the present by it. All in, and the hardest thing. The episode opens on a flashback to St. James Middle School, where Sasha, Marcy, and Anne are sent to the principal's office for a prank involving K-pop and puppies. The first two girls are given an easy time, with the principal impressed by their technical abilities, while lamenting they don't direct their energy to something more serious. But Anne is given an essay to write about who she is, due to having intellect and talent, but only using it in service of other people's ideas. Back in the present, Andreas has begun his invasion of Earth as, you know what? These episode recaps serve two purposes. For people who have already seen the show to be quickly reminded of the events of the episode by seeing my take on the story, and for people who haven't seen the show to understand what I'm referencing in my analysis section following the recap. This episode and the next one make up a two-part finale of Amphibia, and so I assume that basically everyone who has seen the show is deeply familiar with the plot, and those who haven't, well, maybe watch it yourself. I know it's not good policy for a YouTuber to tell people to stop watching their channel and to do something else, and that statistically a lot of people who do leave are not going to make their way back. But I stand by my decision to sabotage my own watch statistics for the last few minutes of this video, in the interest of making a better end product. Anyway, on to the next section. The two major antagonists of this episode are Darcy and Andreas, working together to coordinate the invasion of Earth. Both of these antagonists are defeated in the same way, by appealing to some inner sense of humanity within them. Darcy was defeated by trying to reach out to Marcy, while Andreas was defeated by reaching out to Andreas. It wasn't any of the girls who were able to reach Marcy though, but Marcy herself, realizing that the ideal version of life she was offered by the core wasn't real, and that she needed to accept the negative parts of life just as much as the positive ones. Marcy originally came to Amphibia to stop her parents from moving away, so she could spend more time with her friends forever. But that's not something that's possible to do even with the music box and another world, because people constantly change and mature, becoming different as time goes on. In the same way, her relationship with her friends will change no matter what. Her leaving them was just another way of making that change happen, even though it wasn't ideal. But examining that relationship in the first place is what finally causes her to snap out of the trap laid by the core. She was offered a perfect version of her friends in the core who would agree with everything she said, but her real friends fought with her and disagreed and could even be bossy at times. Just like the people of Wartwood accepted Anne, warts and all, to really be someone's friend is to accept all of them, and realizing that the core only wanted her for her brain and not her memories of her life before Amphibia is what caused Marcy to realize a true friend likes all of their friend. Andreas, on the other hand, is defeated by appealing to Andreas, what he wanted to do, instead of what the core wanted him to do. His entire life after taking the crown has not been his own to live, as he's really only acting out the will of a hive mind, hoping to win its approval. This story is familiar to us because it's the same thing that Anne has spent years of her life doing, going along with what other people want her to do in an attempt to win approval, whether it was stealing a music box for her friends or something with more weight behind it. Because Andreas was the same way, Anne was able to connect with him to point out that the current way he was living was wrong, though with nothing left to fall back on, this revelation alone did very little. It's Leaf's letter to him that reminded him of older days, when he still had something worth living for, and ideas of his own that finally woke him up to what he ought to be doing, not prolonging a conflict that exists purely to prolong itself, but to act of his own accord. He may have been possessed by the core to keep fighting anyway, but his final act in the series is to give up what he's been fighting for thousands of years in an attempt to undo some of the damage. The fact that one of Leaf's descendants was the one to make this connection at last is just a way of bringing his arc full circle, and we know that these descendants were the right ones for the task because they didn't just keep her new name, but her old traditions like the planter family dance. This dance also helped to wrap up some of the trauma that the planter family's been keeping separate from their relationship to Leaf, as the Herons who attacked the Toad Tower were the same ones who killed Sprig and Polly's parents, and were the same ones unleashed on Los Angeles later. That Sprig and Polly were able to defeat these birds not by killing them in retaliation, but freeing them from Andreas's collars, then taming them to work on the same side. The Herons did not have collars when they attacked Wartwood all those years ago, so it's the same bird brain at the end of the episode as it was back then, but simply getting revenge over and over is far worse than converting an enemy to an ally in terms of net gain. The trauma is healed by controlling it, not ignoring it, and one thing that Sprig and Anne can no longer ignore is the fact that Anne's journey is done. For a moment it seemed like they'd be stuck in Amphibia forever, as they were told there was only enough power in the gyms to fight off the collapsing moon or go home. And they didn't hesitate to fight, even though they had worked so hard to get home in the first place. It mirrors Sasha's motivations from the first season especially, as she was originally planning on letting the Toads invade with her strength to get back home, not caring what happens to the world she wanted to abandon anyway. But the girls have all changed, and just as Marcy couldn't go back to the way things used to be and stay that way forever, Sprig eventually had to accept that sometimes people changing means people leaving. After a time skip, Sasha mentioned that even after all the adventures they had together in Amphibia, they still drifted apart. So for Sprig to accept that his surrogate sister is going to change, he has to accept that she's going to leave him eventually, and then take the parts of him that have changed as a result and make the best of it. He becomes an adventurer alongside Ivy, and he works on collecting the memories of her adventures too. It helps that he saw a perfect example of this through the person he was about to lose. After months of not being able to see her friends, Anne reunites with them, and immediately goes back to being happy with the others, their love persisting over all that time. So this made it easier for Sprig to say goodbye, because he got to see that what he felt for his sister wouldn't fade out over time as long as he refused to let it fade. Taking the impact that a person has had on you and using it to change who you are is a big part of moving on in life. Even after something good comes to an end, like a relationship, you can still find positives by embodying them yourself. Andreas is able to tell off the core at the end of the show by quoting Anne's exact words to Sasha at the end of the Season 1 finale, "Standing up to you." And even Anne herself is able to inspire so many other people while still admitting that she has personal growth to see herself undergo. She rejects an offer of selfishly using unlimited power from the gyms so that she can save others instead. Then later she rejects an offer from the Cosmic Guardian so that she can reincarnate. Because to accept that offer would mean to die, and thus to stagnate as the person she currently was. I think it's pretty fitting that after a meeting with a literal deity, Anne would go back to Earth and become a museum employee, teaching intrigued students, since what better way is there to continue embodying the effect she had on other people? Even after all the adventures and changes Anne underwent, she was still able to move on, though not completely, because she still got to be the Frog Lady.